Brute Force is a squad-based third-person shooter that was developed by Digital Anvil, published by Microsoft Game Studios and released on the Xbox in June of 2003. Reviews in 2003 were mostly positive for this Xbox exclusive, and it actually went on to break sales records for the highest selling Xbox game in one day and 1 week. Set in the year 2340, where humans have settled in numerous areas of the galaxy and are pretty much good chums with a few different alien races, you take control of 4 members of the Confederation. The Confederation basically acts as a galactic police force, which does sound cool, so I'm sorry if I got your hopes up because this game does absolutely nothing with that premise. Anyway, within the Confederation, there is an elite division made up of 4 members with special abilities, and the subtle codename for this new division is Brute Force. The story is fairly simple and follows the Brute Force team on numerous missions, gunning down a variety of criminals across the galaxy, from humans to hostile aliens and even zombie-like mutants. I'll be honest, the majority of the plot has fallen out of my head immediately after playing this game, and that's not to say that it's bad, but it just isn't fleshed out enough to be memorable, and that's sort of how I feel about the majority of this title. Now, although this is technically a squad-based third-person shooter, that description may make it sound more tactical than it actually is. Yes, you do run around in a group of 4, and yes, they do have their own weapon sets and special abilities, but the game doesn't seem to be designed in a way to get the most out of this. The 4 members of your squad include Tex, your standard military tough guy who has the special ability to hold and fire 2 weapons at once. You also have Hawk, a sneaky female sniper that can turn invisible and stab unaware enemies. Flint, who is a synthetic, which I assume means she's some sort of android. She's also a sniper and has the ability to auto-target. Finally, to round out the pack, you have Brutus, a warrior from a race of crocodile people. Yes, I know it's a little weird. His special ability is that he can basically go feral whenever he wants and get some boosts to his strength and health while he runs around on all 4s. Most of the missions play out in exactly the same way, in that you have to shoot your way through every single obstacle. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not a fan of frantic and explosive action, but because of the way Brute Force is set up, it feels like it drops the ball. I would love to use Hawk and sneak around quietly taking down enemies one by one. I would love to snipe enemies from a distance with Flint and play it safe, but every time you turn a corner in the game, every enemy in that area becomes aware of your presence and starts shooting or running towards you. Brute Force is just non-stop, mindless action, so your squad mates are only really useful when you need to switch to another character if you're taken down. I suppose it also doesn't help that the shooting itself feels a bit limp, and none of the weapons are particularly fun to use, even though the main character runs around with a minigun. So while Brute Force is non-stop action, it's very bland non-stop action, as you run across a number of outdoor environments that are both varied and at the same time all of them basically the same. I know that sounds like a huge contradiction, so I'll explain that by saying that each environment feels like they just slapped a different texture on the ground and changed the lighting. But whether you're shooting your way through a big open area with grass, a big open area with snow, or a big open area with lava, none of these areas have much to offer in terms of gameplay. Overall, there is something about the way this game controls with its movement and occasionally awkward camera that made me think that this may have been rushed out the door. There is a floatiness to the aiming that isn't really bothersome, but just adds to the list of aspects that appear underdeveloped. Brute Force does offer co-op, and that's probably the best way to play the game, as shooting aliens in the face is obviously more fun with a friend. Sadly, one of you is going to get stuck playing as someone who isn't Tex, and you'll have to make your way through with lesser abilities, but hey, at least the option is there. One thing that is a shame with Brute Force is that visually it's fine. The tech that they used to build the world looks decent, but the trouble is they decided to put nothing in it. You would assume that in the far-flung future where a bunch of different species are coexisting and sharing technology, that you'd see a lot more buildings or get the impression of a world that is more lived in. But each of these missions seems to take place in a new barren wasteland that has the odd structure but nothing to add character to the world. Other areas of its presentation aren't too bad. There are some well done cutscenes sprinkled throughout that give a welcome insight into each of the characters' personality. although characters are surprisingly sexist considering it's over 300 years into the future.
You'll rendezvous on Caspian with the last member of your team, Flint. A sniper with unparalleled skill. I should forewarn you, she is a synthetic.
Artificial and a woman. Bratton.
Sound design is largely disappointing, as the sound effects for the weapons are quite weak and almost fade into the background, so from time to time you might run out of ammo and not even realise it. Lines delivered from the voice cast are somewhat appropriate for their time, if not a little cheesy and generic, so I wouldn't say that they add to any of the characters in a way that makes them more likeable.
My clan must be avenged.
Ah, hell. Might as well, sir. We're here.
Faint background music will play throughout your killing spree, but nothing that feels original or memorable, and being that this game plays like an over-the-top action movie, you'd think that there'd be an opportunity here for something a little more impactful. Approaching Brute Force, I was hopeful. A sci-fi squad-based third-person shooter with a crocodile man is a premise that is potentially something I can get on board with. But after the first few missions, I realised that I was going to be let down by a game that felt undercooked in many areas, and while it has some interesting ideas, it doesn't fully deliver on any of them. If this game had some more time in development to make it feel less bare, then Brute Force could have been a game that I'd recommend for your shelf. But unless you're dead set on having a complete collection of original Xbox exclusives, I'd give this one a miss.